Imagine a world where the most menacing sound in the forests didn't come from giant terrestrial predators, but from the heavy beating of wings capable of casting shadows over colossal tree trunks, a world where danger descended from the sky, silent and unpredictable, and where every movement within the vegetation could attract creatures of unimaginable size. Yet they existed for millions of years. They dominated entire landscapes, shaping ecosystems that today would have no equivalent. Because the Earth, at a certain point, produced the impossible. Insects so large that they broke limits that modern science has always considered insurmountable. For generations, it was believed that this could never have happened. Contemporary biology seemed to establish a clear ceiling on the size of arthropods, based on the limitations of the oxygen diffusion system. However, each fossil discovery, each technical review, and each new geological analysis revealed a more radical and less predictable past than any originally formulated hypothesis. The conviction that small creatures have always been small began to crumble in the face of evidence that insisted on telling a different story. The Earth once functioned under very different rules than it does today. It was only when researchers re-examined rocks from the Carboniferous period that the scientific narrative began to crumble. Microscopic bubbles of air trapped in minerals pointed to atmospheric oxygen levels exceeding 30%, far beyond the modern 21%. This concentration profoundly altered the physiology of organisms. In such an environment, passive respiration systems ceased to be severe limitations. Metabolic efficiency increased, and what would seem unfeasible today became natural. The very notion of biological limits needed to be revised. With advances in high-precision tomography and biomechanical modeling, fossil structures previously seen as distorted began to make sense. Wing fragments showed reinforced veins capable of supporting the flight of creatures with wingspans of almost 3 meters. Fossilized jaws presented proportions that indicated functional strength, not evolutionary exaggeration. Each new piece of data reaffirmed that gigantism was not impossible. It was perfectly compatible with the conditions of that time. What seemed like fantasy gained scientific coherence. However, to truly understand these giants, it was necessary to observe the environment in which they lived. The Carboniferous forests were unlike those of today. They were dense ecosystems, full of deep swamps, massive tree trunks, and endless accumulations of organic matter. Slow decomposition caused the continuous release of oxygen, saturating the air and creating a stable climate that favored large organisms. Without abrupt fluctuations and without competing vertebrate predators, gigantism was not only possible, it was advantageous. These insects weren't forcing their biology. They had found an environment that maximized every aspect of their body structure. Giant wings provided stability in dense, humid currents. The natural armor of their exoskeleton made them difficult to confront. Their enlarged size offered an advantage in hunting, defense, and mastering available resources. They weren't evolutionary exceptions. They were the logical apex of a world shaped for excess. An oxygen-saturated planet doesn't limit, it propels. And this amplification wasn't limited to a single species. Millipedes the size of small vehicles, colossal sea scorpions, giant dragonflies. Gigantism was so common that it practically rebuilt the entire ecological chain. These arthropods occupied niches that today belong to vertebrates. They were powerful predators, dominant herbivores, strategic decomposers. There was no balance similar to the current one. The absence of terrestrial vertebrates made the arthropod kingdom an unquestionable reality for millions of years. However, this absolute dominance did not last. The slow transition that destroyed gigantism began almost imperceptibly. Climate change caused the decline of swamp forests. Decomposition ceased to produce oxygen on such a large scale. The atmosphere began to lose its saturation. But this change by itself does not explain the sudden disappearance of these giants. A gradual drop in oxygen should have resulted in a proportional reduction in the size of the arthropods, not their near-complete elimination. The turning point came when new competitors began to occupy territories previously monopolized by giant arthropods. The first terrestrial vertebrates, primitive but adaptable, emerged at a critical moment. With efficient lungs, active circulation, and internal skeletons, these organisms did not depend on atmospheric stability. While giant insects were shaped by a specific environment, vertebrates possessed a resilience that allowed them to explore new, previously inaccessible niches. Silent competition became inevitable. With the advancement of vertebrates, the giants began to face challenges that their biology could not overcome. The drop in oxygen amplified their physiological limitations. Competition for resources became more intense. What was once an advantage became a vulnerability. The larger the insect, the greater the difficulty in adapting to the new reality. Their dimensions, perfect for a saturated planet, became a burden in an unstable world. The ecological hierarchy changed rapidly. The collapse of gigantism revealed a profound characteristic of the history of life. Evolution is not guided by permanent advantages, but by momentary circumstances. Organisms that dominate entire eras can disappear in the face of conditions beyond their control. The rise and fall of giant insects was not an evolutionary failure, but a direct portrait of the interdependence between life forms and their environment. When the environment changes, the logic of survival changes with it. And it is precisely this realization that makes the past so disturbing. Because contrary to what many imagine, modern arthropods have not lost the biological capacity to reach extreme sizes. Their current limitations are imposed by the environment, not by genetics. The mechanisms that once allowed gigantism are still present, only dormant. If the planet were to experience atmospheric levels similar to those of the Carboniferous period, nothing would prevent the return of colossal creatures. This possibility, although unlikely at present, is not ruled out by science. Earth's history is marked by atmospheric cycles, climate inversions, and episodes of extreme change. At various times, the planet has assumed chemical configurations that favored completely different life forms. Gigantism is not an isolated phenomenon of the past, but a direct response to specific conditions that could, in theory, reappear. Understanding this scenario means recognizing that our parameters of normality are fragile. The Earth does not operate according to human logic. It transforms itself, sometimes abruptly, and takes all forms of life with it. The world we know is just an intermediate chapter in a much broader sequence. And if insect gigantism was once a reality, then perhaps the most important question is not why they appeared, but why they are no longer here, and what that means for the distant future. The story of giant insects reveals a planet far more unstable and unpredictable than we imagine. Earth oscillates between extremes that redefine what life can be. The colossi of the Carboniferous period didn't disappear because they were unviable, but because the world changed too quickly. And this raises an inevitable question. If the planet has already created such disproportionate beings once, what would prevent it from doing so again? Each discovery pushes the limits of our understanding and reminds us that, under the right conditions, the impossible can simply become the rule again. If this investigation has broadened your understanding of Earth's history, subscribe to our channel. Here we reveal themes hidden beneath eras of geological silence, showing how the past holds answers for the future. Leave a comment about how you imagine the return of giant creatures in a transformed world. Like the video, so more people can access these forgotten stories, and share it with anyone who enjoys exploring the deepest mysteries of evolution. The planet's story is not finished. It continues to unfold, and understanding it is the first step to understanding what may yet emerge.